Earlier in the year, I was asked this really cool question at a workshop in Belgrade. It was, how did you become a person again? I think at the time I didn't really do it justice, so over the next 10 or so minutes, I want to have a go at kind of exploring this with you because it's a really deep issue, especially for me. I guess to start with, a good place to sort of look at is like, how did I cease to become a person or cease to feel like I was a person? Because obviously I've been human all along, but how did I lose sight of that? And I think the truth is, I never actually believed I was human, not fully, not since as long as I can remember. I think, how did that happen? I think as a little one, having been abused and hurt, there was so much of myself and my experiences that I kept secret from the people that loved me, from my parents, from my friends, from everyone, except the people that hurt me. And keeping the secret meant that all of the feelings, the badness, the sense of shame and guilt, and the idea that it was my fault, that I was wrong, and the things that people told me about myself were stuck inside in this blackness that never got to see the light of day. And because it never got to see the light of day, it meant that I never got to find out that that wasn't true. So I lived my life as if it was. And the challenge with that, I guess, is that the people around me, my family, teachers, my friends, could say as many nice things as they liked about me, but because I believed at heart I was a monster in a child suit pretending to be a human being, they never went through. They never kind of filtered through into me. They just stayed on the surface and then kind of washed away. So it felt like everything in my life that people understood about me was just window dressing. It was something to hide the monster. It wasn't real. And I went through much of my childhood believing that, and by the time I was a teenager, believing that I was an alien, and that it was this alien that was inside me that was making me bad, that was going to make me do something terrible. It made perfect sense to me that I was fundamentally different to those people around me. I was separate, and I was just pretending to exist in their world. Um, Going through your teenage years as an alien is just incredibly unusual. It was weird how I could live this double life of being able to have fun, because I had fun in my teenage years as well. It wasn't all unending badness. I was in a band, I had some mates. I wasn't a cool kid, but I was certainly, I got on okay. And how could it be that I had the great stuff in my youth and yet still felt like I wasn't a human being? And I guess again it was that idea that all of this stuff was me living a lie, living in society, because where else did I live? I couldn't find an alien planet to go and be on. So I was just being in the world, but I wasn't being myself. And I guess at university again, when I was kind of finally somewhere that I felt like I belonged, there was still this part of me in there that I could never show to those that said that they cared about me. And then imagine the day that I met the doctor, the psychiatrist. By this point, I was living in many worlds, but I was living in a world where I felt I was being watched by cameras. There was the alien, there was a conspiracy, I was having visions, my emotions were all over the place, and I was terrified. And I met this doctor, and he was lovely, and he was really reassuring, and kind of what he was saying to me was that, I wasn't bad. It wasn't anything wrong with me. I was unwell. I was ill. And that was like throwing me a lifeline, really. This idea that I had this illness that was causing all of these failings. And it just felt such an attractive concept, because which would you choose? Bad, evil, and dangerous to the world, or you have this illness and that's causing you to feel like you're bad, evil, and dangerous. Definitely go for the illness, even if I didn't fully believe it. But underneath the idea of illness, I guess what the doctor was also saying to me felt very attractive, because he was pretty much saying that I was different, that I had this thing called schizophrenia, psychosis, psychotic illness, schizoaffective disorder, whatever label got attached to it at that point. that I was born different to the people around me, that my brain processed things differently, that I had different amounts of chemicals in my brain. There might be a structural abnormality, genetic vulnerability, but I was ultimately different to my peers. And that fitted with my worldview. It gave me a nice out, it kind of said, yes, you are different, but it's not your fault you're different. And that doesn't mean you're evil, you're just sick. So, yeah, that was kind of gave me this identity that was a lot better than the bad one, the sick one. And over the course of the next few years, I guess what happened is really strange. I guess I dropped all of the pretense that I thought I was living, the pretense of having a future, of having friends, about having a life, interests, hobbies, potential, joy, sadness. I dropped all of those human things and became the illness. It was as if the doctor had given me a way of existing in the world without being fully human, because people stopped expecting things of me. They didn't expect me to do what other people did. I didn't expect that of myself. And the colours and the vivacity of life with the medication and the sedation and the kind of suppression of emotions started to fall away too. And my friends fell away, and things that made me fell away until I was there, the schizophrenic, going to day centres, hospital appointments, spending time as an inpatient, and that was it. And it's kind of weird because at the same time, it felt right. It felt like this was my place in the world. I felt comfortable in an uncomfortable kind of way. And the doctor also gave me tablets. They gave me tablets that said, if you take these tablets, you can exist out there in the world. They will control this illness, this sickness, and allow you to function as if you're a human being. And so not only did he validate the fact that I felt like I wasn't human and that was different, he gave me a pathway to exist alongside people without having to pretend that I was. And it was beautiful. And also pretty fundamentally flawed, because where do you go with that? The medication was effective. It kind of helped me exist. And that's what I did for a while. I existed. So how did I go from existing as a walking illness to being a person as I really feel like I am now? What changed? I think initially it was other people, really. I was so fortunate that I found other people that saw more than just the sickness that I felt that I was, that saw potential and hope and a future and a history. They saw sense in what I was saying when I saw nothing. And these people, some of them were part of the voluntary sector, so Network for Change. Some of them were my friends, people within the Hearing Voices group, the peer support group I used to go to eventually. My family and people kind of connected with me that didn't fully swallow the idea that I had no future. These people helped me start to ask questions, because I'd stopped asking questions, I just accepted. But they started to ask me questions about how I felt, how I'd reached this place. They started to ask me questions about my voices. They started to ask me questions about my history. And I had no real answers to these questions except for, it is like this because I'm ill, because of my genetics, because of the schizophrenia. Eventually those kind of stock answers became unsatisfying. There were obviously surface answers, and other people's interest in the idea that there's something underneath it helped me become interested too. I got exposed to different stories of other people that had gone through these journeys, and in hearing about their journeys I recognised parts of myself, but I saw potential for a future. Not a giant potential of raging fire or anything, just a tiny little ember of potential that I was frightened of, but that over time started to get bigger and started to really provide me with the impetus to search for my own answers. And I guess part of this was also getting a life. One of the problems when you get stuck within the mental health system and seen as severely and enduringly mentally ill is that life stops. And how do you ever try and make sense of things and move forwards if you are stuck in a hole and you can't see your way out of it, if you're comfortably stuck in the hole because that's all you've ever thought you could expect? just doesn't happen. And being part of the Hearing Voices group and Network for Change and kind of some other sort of peer support stuff, it gave me a social network, a community that I belonged to. It helped me meet some amazing people that I thought were, I was just inspired by the courageousness of everyday living with some of this stuff. I started to go out and do music, karaoke, get involved in artwork, volunteering, and just a whole load of stuff that meant that all the things that I'd let go of when I became a patient, I started to grow new things around myself and be connected to things so that I was no longer this ball of blackness. There was just more there. And over time, it's like it started to filter through all the colour, all the kind of vivacity, all the interest, and all the community. And it started to be that over the years, I felt less evil, I felt less different from others. I found people that I was close to, and I started to find myself again as a human and see myself as a human being, as worthy of being in the world as everybody else, because I already thought other people were worth being in the world. It was just myself that I felt was different, and I started to feel less different. I got into work, I got a job, I fell in love, all of these things, and eventually I was living alongside other people, not believing that I should be locked up into a box. And then I stopped the meds. Why did I stop the meds? I guess because I'd believed I needed the medication because it was my pathway to being in the world as an ill, sick, dangerous person. It was the thing that allowed me to have a life, and I always felt that I would need that. But then as I started to feel like I belonged in the world and started to have strategies to deal with the distress that came up from being in the world, because actually being around things is difficult. It brought a lot of difficult voices. It brought a lot of kind of intense beliefs and challenges. So I had to find ways of coping with those. And as I started to find ways of coping with those, I thought, well, maybe I don't need the meds as much. Over the course of a few years, I withdrew, and then it hit. It's kind of like, it's probably not a great med story, because a month later it all came flooding back. The pain, the suffering, the voices, the intense beliefs that people were stealing my thoughts. It was absolute chaos. And how's this a good part of the story? Well, I guess what it really did is get me unstuck further, because it revealed that inside me, although I'd felt that I was fully a person, what I hadn't noticed is that underneath all of that medication and underneath the insides of me was this core of the sense of being bad, this evil, this sense of being other and different and fundamentally broken and wrong. It was still there. And coming off the meds almost unleashed it, so that it started to take over the whole of me. And whilst that was frightening and overwhelming, it was amazing, because it meant that I saw it. For the first time, I actually saw it, and I knew what was going on. I knew the reason that I felt this way. Got myself into therapy, got myself into doing a lot of work with some of those more difficult voices and challenging voices, and did a lot of work on feeling safe in my own skin. I'm still doing that work to this day. But in doing that, what's kind of happened is that I'm now building that kind of colour, building that lightness from the inside, rather than just letting the world filter through. It's like I'm growing it. And what I'm realising is that this core of badness that I've always held within me isn't a core of badness at all. It's a shadow. It's a reflection of the things that people have said to me in the past that have led me to feel this way. It's not me. It's a reflection of them. And what's inside this is just a child. And no child is ever bad. I believe that very, very solidly. And I guess living in this world I find really difficult. Having feelings and emotions and having witnessed so many difficult things is difficult. I feel terror, I feel intense anxiety at times and fear. I feel pain and suffering in the world and in myself. But also I feel joy and I feel connection and belongingness and inspiration and hope and all this awesome stuff as well. I feel part of something big. I feel part of the Hearing Voices movement, which is really awesome. And I guess where I'm at now is that I'm not trying to push away the darkness and the kind of pain, but rather welcome it, because without that, I would not be able to experience the joy. Without the darkness, there wouldn't be the colours or the light. It's super cheesy, but it's true. And I would rather live in this world without the filter of medication and acknowledging what it is to be a person. This whole mix of things. I'd rather live this life than go back to being the schizophrenic in a ball, in a darkened room, separate from the world. So that's kind of my short thought. I hope it's been useful for you in some way. It's certainly an evolving process. I wouldn't say that I have the answer or that I'm fully there. But the thing I'm glad about is that I'm on the path and I'm living. And that pretty much is how I want it to stay.